Welcome back to the podcast. My guests today are Mary Glaves. She's the BHA Alaska Chapter Coordinator, and Ryan Schuman, hatchery manager and biology and blue collar all around hatchery person in Cake, which is different than the down south hatchery, which is also very different than Fish Farm. So we'll clarify that right off the bat there. Thanks for being on here, both of you.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So I guess we'll start it with the Juneau big project here that I've been reading about the last a couple days. Down here in Ketchikan, we don't have any bridge to our airport, and there is a bridge between Juneau and Douglas, and there is talk of adding a second bridge, which is a huge issue, very expensive, and then the options would impact the Mendenhall Wetlands State Game Refuge, and so that's something that BHA is working on currently. So, Mary, can you kind of give us an overview of this second bridge or the second access project that's maybe moving forward, maybe not, or is being planned?
So right now they're kind of in the scoping period. They've done some studies on the area, and in 1976, the state legislature designated the state game refuge in part so that young hunters could learn to pursue waterfowl and have a place to hunt. And it's such a treasured area. If you live in Southeast Alaska and you don't have a boat, it's kind of a bummer, right? So like you have limited access to all of the different wonderful areas that we have to explore. And the wetlands is just one of those places where people have endless opportunity for sport hunting, fishing, and so it's a big hot topic right now. The second crossing, or the north crossing, because all of the proposed options are north of the current crossing that connects very close to downtown Juneau to what we call South Douglas Island. All of them except one are within the refuge. And so there are conservation organizations like the Southeast Alaska Land Trust and Trout Unlimited that are really have put a lot of thoughtful comments in about how valuable the refuge is intact. And so BHA as an advocacy group with a lot of interest in this preserving this hunting area for people. We have now come out trying to steer the responsible decision to the Salmon Creek crossing, if any crossing.
Mhm. So I'm looking at a little map here. This is from the Juneau Empire's article. I don't know if it was a couple days ago or weeks ago. So heading, I guess, north from the crossing that exists right now, there's the Salmon Creek crossing potential, and that's kind of the least. It's one of the least expensive, I think.
It
Then
is.
there's the Twin Lakes, which would be the proposed site between those two kind of lakes that Egan Drive just kind of nips, I guess, a little bit. Then there's the Vanderbilt, which is kind of in the Lemon Creek area. And then there's two proposals in one. So one of them, which one is that one? What's the name of that one?
Sunny Point,
Sunny
probably.
Point. Yeah, I didn't write that one down. So the two
That's okay.
different Sunny Point proposals start on the Juneau side, and then they connect. And this is, it seems like, not very far from the edge of the airport runway. Um,
Mhm.
And then the most expensive one, which was 1 point whatever billion dollars, would be all the way over at Fritz Cove. So those are the proposals, and they just get larger and larger as you start to go north, and uh, pretty intensely disruptive to the game refuge.
Definitely. And each area, comes with its own concerns. It's such a southeast thing to have like your little areas of your niches of your neighborhoods, right? And so like if it's in your backyard, you probably don't want it there. I know the Fritz Cove area especially also has a lot of commercial fishing traffic too. And so that would further impact those folks. And so there's a little bit of that behind it too.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's pretty wild because even on the Douglas side, when I went to Clowalk High School, grew up in Southeast. Every time I went to Juneau, it was for basketball, and it didn't really seem like there was any Douglas. It was just Juneau, and there was just that little collection of houses on the other side of the bridge. But now that I've been up there and skied, I see that like it does kind of wrap around all the way to that north end there. So I just can't even imagine there being enough space to put a bridge or an access point there. Like, what would I mean, are there big enough gaps to be able to have a road? Or are they talking about uh, somehow getting people to sell their land? I just both sides look pretty well inhabited at this point.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest concerns. So Southeast Alaska Land Trust actually works with homeowners around the refuge and purchases property within that tide line that's not above the tide line, rather that's not managed by the Alaska Department of Fish and Game. And one of their biggest conservation concerns is kind of keeping this intact habitat in an already widely developed area surrounding the refuge. So that is such a great point, that there's not a ton of area to move out. And then you might also, and it depending on which option comes up for selection, if it ever got that far, is, there would be eminent domain issues as well
Hmm.
with
I think
property.
if I lived at that Fritz Cove area and I worked in Auk Bay, it would be sweet to have, if I was like 3 or 4 blocks or maybe like a half mile from the bridge, that'd be perfect. Just nice. I don't have to go all the way into town, cross the bridge, and all the way back out. But yeah, in the meantime, that'd just be a huge pain and very, very expensive.
It's so Douglas is what we call Juneau Far, right? If you're in Juneau, or if you live on Douglas and you want to go out and launch your boat out of Auk Bay, Statter Harbor, we say it's so far, right? In the grand scheme of how most folks commute everywhere else in the world, it's less than a half an hour at most.
Mhm.
They did do a study that actually showed the traffic patterns and directions, and most folks are most folks need that downtown crossing. That is where things are coalescing. And one of the time studies showed a less than 50-second savings for someone getting from, I believe it was North Douglas across, and then to like mid area Juneau. And so the need, you have to define need, right?
Mm.
Is the need there?
It would be nice, but yeah,
Would
I think
not.
if it was a straight line, like you said, like people who are commuting down south an hour one way in the morning to get to a different community or where their job is, I think here it's just the fact that you can look across and you can see where you need to go, and it just
Mhm.
seems like frustrating to have to go, man, I got all the way down there and just come all the way back. But yeah, need and want is very different. I read that in 19, I think was it 84 was one of the initial proposals. And that was back when Juneau had 24,000 people. So, and probably a lot less growth on that side. But that was when there was a lot more money. Now it just seems like not really sure where the money's going to come from. And with you guys, there was a 31,000, 32,000 population in Juneau, something like that around there.
Yeah, we're hovering around that right now.
Yeah, it seems like kind of tough time to do it.
Yeah, I think there's other development factors at play. And I think that may be swaying some of the data on the research side. So there's a tourism management strategy. Juneau, I mean, as you know, you live in Ketchikan. You've got the cruise ships. It's a place that everyone wants to come, and it's a place that everyone loves to see. I think we need to kind of back up and look at a bigger picture of you know, do we want to become a miniature Seattle, or do we
Mm.
want to, have this access to nature where we can hunt and fish, that the wetlands gets a coho run every year. And there's 8 anadromous fish species in there. People use the wetlands for year round for all kinds
Mhm.
of recreating. And
Yeah.
it's just such a treasured spot.
Yeah, if you wanted all those conveniences, you probably wouldn't live up here. And you really, there has to be something that's sacrificed. And it's just one of those things. Ryan, can you talk to kind of the importance of this sort of habitat for salmon and for other fish? Because I think the impression that people get is these fish just go out in the ocean and they come back 4 or 5 years later, and then they just get in the river and they spawn. So these sort of transitional areas, what happens if you were to disrupt this? What might that do to some of the runs of fish in the area?
Yeah, so it's especially important for species that can spawn intertidally. So both your pink and your chum don't need to make it into 100% fresh water. They don't need to make it up the river to spawn. So the more we tend towards these drier years, we've had trouble getting fish up the creek at the hatchery because it's been so dry during spawning time the last couple years. But the reason chum and pink are generally pretty resilient even when you're seeing declines in coho and kings is because they can spawn in that intertidal area, so those estuarine areas. And as long as they don't dry up on a big negative tide, they'll hatch and they'll mill in that area and they'll still make it out to go out to the ocean to mature. And with that, I mean, you have all of the shorebirds and everything that rely on them for food too. And the same goes for fish like steelhead, dollies, the coastal cutthroats. Everything needs intact environments, or at least as undisturbed as possible. We shouldn't be looking at something that is really a nicety, not a necessity for a city. And that's coming from somebody that just goes there from time to time. I don't live there, full disclosure. Um, And you're not just looking at the physical disturbance either. There's going to be runoff, things like that. There's going to be petroleum that hits the river systems and the estuary systems too. And the more we learn about salmonid reproduction, the more we learn that, they're really sensitive at those crucial times, like right when they're getting fertilized, right before they hatch. Super crucial times to not have any sort of poor water quality affect them if it can be avoided. And, I don't have a ton of skin in the game with the Mendenhall crossing because I don't live there. But as an outdoorsman, I think, I know people in Juneau are, oh, what's the big deal? They're just, the birds deal with the bridge and the highway and the airport. And they do, but this is just another thing. And then there's a buffer area around it where you're not going to be allowed to hunt, and people are going to feel uncomfortable with guns going off close to the bridge or under the bridge or something like that. And you're just going to end up losing opportunity as a sportsman too.
Hmm. Yeah, you mentioned it's just going to be a road, but if you look around that Lemon Creek area, I'm sure that was fantastic way back before it was developed. And
Yeah.
then the valley area with there's Mendenhall, is it Mendenhall Creek or River? Yeah, and
River.
then Montana Creek is up in that kind of area there too.
Mhm.
So you have all of those things that have managed to survive, but you never know how much closer you're getting toward kind of a catastrophic tipping point. And that's you don't want to sound like you're a catastrophist or that you're, using too much hyperbole, but these fish and these the waterfowl are super resilient, but you can't insult them continuously and just think that they're going to keep coming back.
Right. Yeah. And it's a super important area for that Vancouver subspecies of Canada goose too. I know that, and that's so the goose tends to be a little bit bigger too. I think they average something like another 10% larger than your average. They're cool birds that it's just a big goose to the normal observer, but it's cool that we have them here.
Hmm. Do we have like numbers, like how many different species of waterfowl are we talking here that use this? And I guess maybe even birds all together. What are we talking here?
I've got some info, but Mary probably has better info.
You know, Audubon, Alaska has done a lot of work in this on this particular issue, and this area is like a globally important bird area. It's a stopover for birds coming down from northern Alaska and all the way down to the Midwest, Gulf of Mexico area. Some to the East Coast. I mean, we've got a total of 230 species that have been documented on the wetlands. And that's just 77% of, I think, about 300 bird species seen in the Juneau area, counting from like Taku up to Berners. So it is their one stopover between Wrangell and Yakutat. That's the only place that they really have that ecosystem that they can touch down on. And I mean, that's also what makes it great waterfowl hunting for this type of area that normally wouldn't kind of have that access to the rest of the development that's here as well.
When we look for places to hunt down here, there's like some small areas where you might find them, but we don't have just such an expansive area. Some of these little deltas where the rivers come out, like they can have some geese or some mallards or some, but it's more just they might be there, they might not. So you kind of commit to that and hope that they're there. And if you do get a shot, you get a shot. But a lot of times you don't have like new, fresh groups that are trading back and forth or that are coming in. It's when my wife and I were in Juneau a couple weeks ago, just we went to Costco and as we are driving past that, just like they're all here. Like there's widgeon and there's mallards. Like all of them were represented there. It was pretty crazy to see that. And it's this really big spot, and it's no surprise that that's such a used area because so much of Southeast Alaska it's just like kind of here and there, and then boom, huge spot outside of the Stickeen. I guess that's probably pretty big too.
Yeah, that's another huge important bird area, and lots of people I know they'll travel down there just for waterfowl hunting.
Yeah. So what are your favorite hunting things to do or fishing things to do in Alaska?
Me or Ryan?
Whoever wants to start.
For Mary.
Go for it. Okay. Well, I really when I get the opportunity, I really love to go up to the Arctic for caribou. I just love it up there. I've done a sheep hunt up there. Just right around this area, like getting out for mountain goats. I mean, Southeast has, a lot of registration hunt mountain goat opportunity. And so I like to be in the Alpine for sure. That's my passion.
What do you got, Ryan?
Well, this time of year, I'll still head fish a little bit, but I'm really about the sooty grouse. That's what gets me outside this time of year. It reminds me of home a little bit, turkey hunting in the spring. It's just a bunch of small turkeys, call them in or spot them, and that's always a lot of fun. And then jigging all summer long, halibut, lingcod, love lingcod. Probably my favorite thing. And you're allowed one a day, but you can catch them until you're sick of it because they release so easy. Love those. And then spring bear, that might be my favorite hunt of the year. Just getting out in the tidal flats. We've got some really good habitat here on Kupernoth and then over on Kuyu too, right nearby. And yeah, I love that. Love goat hunting. Love getting up in the alpine and everything. And then you get further into the fall. We've got that long moose season here on Kupernoth. Took me 4 years to get my first one, learning how to do it, but it was a lot of fun. And then calling blacktails during the rut. It's always a riot. And I like getting out with my bow as often as I can too. Once I've got, I'm not in a emergency. I've got something in the freezer. I'll take the bow out. But yeah.
Yeah, the mountain goat down here is so awesome. When people think about Alaska, they think of kind of Dall sheep and caribou. Those are kind of the main iconic type hunts. But man, Southeast is great for mountain goat. But I definitely got to do a Dall sheep at some point. I've done caribou a couple times, but that just never gets old. So it's when you hear about these issues in different parts of the state, it's like a whole different region. It's a long way away, but it's almost sad just how many of these issues are still coming up with either hunter access or with populations. People think that Alaska is just it's pristine. Well, yeah, compared to Wyoming or California, but there's still a lot of concerns. So, what's kind of on your radar as one of the more pressing things, or the thing that maybe statewide you're thinking, I really hope that we don't mess this up?
Yeah, that's a
Mary?
great question. I mean, Ryan would probably bring up this bucket biology bill that just kind of came out. Fish are such a valuable resource, and it's getting, bleaker and bleaker every year. And like you said, Alaska is more pristine than, but it's the concern on our end of trying to keep it that way. Our fights are a little bit different than others. Our issues are a little bit different. You know, the Tongass Forest Plan is going to really inform how we manage land here in Southeast. It's the largest national forest. It's I never thought I'd want to live in a rainforest. I grew up in Binghamton, New York, and it rains a fair bit there. And I thought I knew what rain was. And then I came here, and then I really found out what rain was. And then
Hmm.
it wasn't so bad. It's like you could have 3 weeks of rain, and then you get 2 sunny days, and you're like, that's why I live here.
Hmm. Yeah,
But
you can see exactly what the purpose is or what the benefit is. If you're down south in a town and this sidewalks get flooded, or the gutters get flooded, it's just like this is pointless. This is annoying. But you can look around in southeast and think, okay, all of this green, all of these fish and all of this habitat and all these animals, that's what we get with the rain. So it's definitely okay, because without the rain, we don't have this. So it's you can definitely say, yeah, no big deal. It's all right, just raining, just dress warm and you'll be okay.
exactly.
Um,
Go for
yeah,
it.
I guess what Mary was alluding to was HB 169. Um, and I don't know if we've covered that at all, but basically what that is I think it's moved on to the Senate now. It's a bill that proposes to allow individuals and other quote, I think it's qualified parties, or the verbiage is something like that. Anyone that can fill out the paperwork and show they have some sort of a plan and has $100 in their pocket can take up to 500,000 um, eggs, and then the appropriate number of males they would take for the sperm, and they can basically do in-stream incubation for the fish. Now, the bill is written so that it should stay in the same river system. Um, we wrote a letter of opposition to that at BHA, mostly regarding the wording of it and issues around enforcement of not moving the fish. Because when we talk about bucket biology, we're talking about, for instance, the person or persons back in the day that took pike from one spot in Alaska and then introduced them into South Central Matsu area, and the state spent millions of dollars and who knows how many person hours cleaning up that whole mess. Um, we uh, we know that the state has its hands full overseeing the private nonprofit hatchery sector as is, and then adding all of these potential kind of backyard enhancement projects is going to stretch them thin. I don't think they're going to be able to keep up with it. I think people are going to move fish because they want them here, there, or everywhere. And there's going to be unintended deleterious consequences. So
Well,
we'd like to see it cleaned up a bit.
what's the main point of it? Because sometimes, like, if someone comes to with a proposal for adding another access point to Douglas, okay, I can get it. I understand that part, and you can debate that. What's what's the point of this? What's the why?
Do you want the stated purpose?
Oh, I'll
Um,
take as many versions, the
the
cynical
stated
version, the real version, whatever.
the stated purpose is, to enhance struggling salmon stocks. My fear is that this is a way for the state to kind of shift some of the responsibility onto private citizens for managing and replenishing salmon stocks instead of addressing issues that are more pressing and more hot politically, like trawl bycatch, for instance. I'm not accusing anything, but this is my thought on it.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Mary, do you have a comment?
For that goes, I mean, I was not surprised that it moved through to the Senate, and I haven't seen an update again beyond that. But I think even a lot of these bills may, even be well intentioned, and we are trying to problem solve at a rapid rate, right? We've got a lot of challenging issues around all species with climate change and just inflation and varying other challenges in society. But I wasn't surprised to see it move. I think folks are trying to solve problems, but we want to make sure that we're doing sound science and have good conservation goals in mind. And so yeah, I would probably agree with Ryan's take on that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
we
I mean, just to clarify, I'm not saying anyone's doing anything malicious. I just think it's probably coming from a good place, but I'd like to see it better thought out.
Yeah, there's a lot of times, even in Alaska, of the history of getting a little bit too involved and maybe get a little bit too hands-on because you feel like you want to do something. And even if the best interests are at heart, sometimes the unintended consequences or the consequences that you don't even foresee are the ones that end up happening. So it can be difficult to do little because that can be perceived as doing nothing. And sometimes people, you got to do something, got to do something, got to do something. And then what you end up doing ends up being not exactly what needs to be done. So, yeah, that's a tough spot to be in for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Reactionary, management seldom works out the way you think it's going to be. You try to be forward looking, but no one can see the future. Um, and then Mary, you touched on the Tongass forest revision, the plan revision. That's a huge thing going on in this whole region of the state. I know I sat for the meeting in Cake, and you probably sat for. Did they only do one in June, or they do multiple?
Did one in Juneau. The fire plan was launched at the Juneau Economic Development Council Summit. It have an annual innovation summit, and I did go to that. It is a paid event, but they did provide a sliding scale option for folks to come attend. So the Forest Service is currently in their scoping phase. They did one workshop in Juneau, and they do a presentation in the beginning and kind of let you know where we've been, which was old growth logging, where we're trying to go, which is transition to younger growth logging and more in community influx of economy in sustainable ways. So they're looking at things like kelp farming and other mariculture programs and what kind of tourism is or is not good for certain areas. And this is the public's time to really come out and support the process. I know some communities and some folks are probably a little burnt out from providing feedback to the Forest Service. They do a lot of long, drawn out plans to kind of get where they're going, but the public process is slow, right? We all have to endure these things. And they are taking comments. They will continue to take comments throughout the year in hopes that they're going to have their draft plan out in January of 25. The Spruce Root is supporting their efforts, and on Spruce Root's website, you can find a form. Like if you don't know what to comment on or how to comment, or you don't have a wild and scenic river proposal, but you do want to participate in the process, they do have a form with questions where you can be prompted on how you want to provide input. Best to provide it by the end of May so they can start kind of analyzing all that information and integrate it into developing their plan. But yeah, it's going to be really important for the next 15 years of management on the Tongass. And there will be phases that, BHA will be helping them get the word out about.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know if the two of you got to sit in. Well, I know Mary, you did, but Jeff, I don't know if you were able to sit in on any of the meetings they had in Ketchikan, but I think it's interesting. I'd like to hear, what your takeaway, Mary, was from the public comment in Juneau. And I'll say the public comment in Cake, there's a lot of wanting to designate more rivers for protections, ones that are culturally significant to the native peoples here in Cake. And a lot of wanting to have a subsistence and local priority for everything, and a big emphasis on the local priority, not wanting more guide or outfitters operating in the area, things like that, especially during certain times of the year. So subsistence sockeye and moose season were the big ones. And there was a general frustration expressed with the Forest Service that kind of bounced back to the last time we all remember giving comments when the roadless rule was up for contention. A lot of locals here anyway expressed that they didn't feel heard during that process. So
I remember growing up in Klawak, it was mostly a logging community, and when the pulp mill went out in Ketchikan, and the logging started to taper before that, some of my friends from middle school, like they had to move back to Oregon, and it was just this, where are my friends going? And so my first instinct when it came to responsible practices slash, maybe it's not great to do a whole lot of logging. I just thought that people were prioritizing trees instead of people because my buddies, they didn't have jobs. And then if you weren't able to transition to a new career or job, you're on Prince of Wales Island. You're not just driving to a different community to get a job. So once you kind of get a little bit older and you see the larger scope of things, you think, oh, okay, well, it's not as simple as we're choosing trees over people. It's we we can't keep this pace and keep cutting and cutting and cutting. And that was on Tongass and then also private land. So um, then the practices in the 60s and the 70s with just cutting everything and right up to the like leaving no stream buffer in some of these areas. So that's an industry that's definitely improved a lot as far as best practices go. But then you look back at some of these second growth areas that like nothing can live in. It's just horribly unhealthy and something that we'd never do again. But now we're trying to, in the process, maybe of kind of cleaning this up and reorganizing this. So it ends up being an interesting opportunity. I know on Prince of Wales, they've been talking about this, was it the restoration economy? So by managing and by helping some of these creeks get restored and all this, it actually ends up being an opportunity. So it's not a matter of logging's gone, we need to bring it back so that we have jobs. There's other opportunities that can come in lieu of that, which is much more beneficial going forward for the resources for responsible use.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so the Southeast Alaska Sustainability Strategy, called SAS, is is basically that. The federal government is infusing 25 million, as an initial investment into natural resources, infrastructure, community capacity, and tribal and indigenous interests. So, with the idea that we want to transition the economy away from logging old growth, and focusing on the sustainable practices, and doing thinning and creating better habitat. And so that is like the new um, trajectory going forward.
Mhm. Yeah, a lot of people talk about how deer love clear cuts a couple years afterwards. And they do, but then once it gets overgrown, then they hate it. Like there's nothing can live there and exist there. So you get a lot of anecdotal feedback, and anecdotal is really important too, but it has to be balanced and there has to be kind of a long-term thing. I know there's been talk about infrastructure in some of these rural communities, but I look back at what Prince of Wales Island was when I was there and growing up and what it is now, and there's not as much going on. And if you are trying to convince a biologist or someone from the Forest Services or someone from outside to move to Craig or Cloaca or Thorn Bay, but you don't even have daycare. Like it's not a place where people are traveling or going to. When my parents moved up as teachers, there was growth and there was daycare and there was, young families were there. And so that's it can be a tough sell. But I think maybe with the addition of cruise ships going into Cloaca, um, that might bring in some more infrastructure and some more people and some population. And so you can have maybe, I don't want to say a population boom, but you might be able to get a more robust approach to restoring these things and have people there, and it can be a beneficial growth. Um, but we'll see.
Yeah, I can't speak to, I lived in Thorn Bay briefly, and it's a beautiful area. Again, I wasn't able to stay there for the reason that I didn't have a sustainable job with a livable income, right? Um, I don't know if cruise ship tourism is the answer pre-infrastructure. I think it might illuminate the need for infrastructure for that purpose. And I don't know that, I can't speak, to that specifically because I don't reside there anymore. So I'm not really sure what local folks are wanting. I'm sure there's a debate about that, just like everywhere else.
Mhm.
But back to like the SAS where you can build a resiliency around economies that fit the place, like mariculture and things like that. I think that's the intent of where to start. The community capacity issue is going to be an ongoing challenge, but it's it's good that we're thinking ahead to try to address some of these issues, right? I mean, we all would love to live in the pristine land, but if you can't afford to live there, what's that balance?
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think some of it too is about using what you already have, not making the footprint any bigger, not making the disruption any bigger. So on the aquaculture side of things, in the marine net pens, we're exploring options of growing kelp after we've released our fish, growing it off the structures, and also throwing some sea cucumbers in the bottom of the rearing pens. It'll keep them clean, reduce the amount of excess feed and feces that ends up on the bottom of the ocean, and you're doubling up there and making the most out of the space you already have. And then with that second regrowth, like you were talking about, Jeff, that's gonna need to get thinned at some point. And the sooner you thin it, the sooner you're opening up corridors for animals to travel through, and then you get a little bit of that regrowth for them to browse on too. So if you're gonna start with some selective logging. Again, there's a decent place to start. Now, that's coming from somebody that has no logging experience.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the use of sea cucumbers with the net pens? And I worked at the fish hatchery in Klawock, and Klawock is unique because, or that the hatchery there, it's unique in that that is might be the only hatchery in Alaska in which the hatchery is on a river that has a native run of fish. It's one of the things that they've kind of learned from the down south when you introduce a genetically maybe inferior or let's just not quite as like I guess the best of stock gets mixed in and then you have a weaker stock. But people think and equate hatcheries to fish farms. So can you kind of talk to the difference if someone hears hatchery and thinks fish farm? Totally different things. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll go through that point by point, or I'll try to. So the moving of fish from system to system down south, that was early on in the hatchery process on the West Coast, and it was practiced in the East Coast too with Atlantics. But what you end up with is they're not necessarily genetically inferior. They're different, and they have different needs at different times of the year. So you could take a fall run Chinook and move it to a system that only really supports spring run Chinook due to the zooplankton abundance at time of year when they emigrate out of the river system. So you put them there, they're genetically wired to leave in the fall, and you try to make them leave in the spring or vice versa, and there's just not the food there. And then, yeah, fish farms are illegal in the state of Alaska, quite intentionally so. So you cannot take a baby salmon, turn it into an adult salmon that has market value at like, say, 6 to 12 pounds or something like that, and then pull it out of the pens, process it, and sell it directly to the fish market. So, that's kind of what you see in Puget Sound and along the coast of British Columbia, around Vancouver Island and everything. You see those Atlantic salmon farms. That is completely illegal in Alaskan waters. Hatcheries in Alaska, with the exception of the two state-run hatcheries and one research hatchery, are all private nonprofit owned. And what we do is we raise salmon to fry smolt size. So they smolt out, they're imprinted on the hatchery river system that they were born in. And we release them depending on the species. The smallest ones we release are 2 grams for the chum, and the largest one could be 100 grams for the kings. And they go out to the ocean 3 years or so and do their thing, and they come back as adults. So what we do is we increase their survival percentage by giving them that boost, giving them supplemental food and protecting them from predators. Now, the polyculture thing, so what we're looking at is potentially adding sea cucumber to the bottom of the pens. DEC has requirements. We're not allowed to just foul up the bottom of the ocean and leave it fouled in a dead zone or anything like that. We have to place our pens that are in the ocean in an area that has significant enough tidal influence and current that it will clear the seabed by the time we're ready to put in our next batch of fish. So like with the chum, we'll pond them in late winter and they're gone by June. By next late winter, that seabed has to be clear again. And that's how we pick our spots.
Mm.
And there's all kinds of bathymetric surveys you can do to, vet a spot for that. But anyway, you put the sea cucumbers in and they scoop up all the poop and the excess feed before it ever makes it out of the pens, theoretically eliminating that. Now, it's not in practice yet, but it's kind of in the thinking it out phase, I guess.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it was there was a Patagonian film called Salmon Nation, I believe, and it was about in Iceland and these areas where the fish farms are, all that you have the fish that are there for a substantially longer period of time. And so all
Yeah.
that waste creates these dead zones. And then you have the fish that, like you said, it's not as a fry, and then you switch out the net pen, which is a tricky thing to do. I remember a couple of times trying to switch out the net pens to wash them, and like you drop a side down, all of a sudden fish are starting to get out, and you just got to get it up there. So then
Yeah.
once they're smolt, then you release them. Um, Way different than these fish being fed out of antibiotics or whatever, and they're swimming around like zombie fish, look horribly unhealthy and gross, and then the whole ecosystem in that area is disrupted because of that. Whereas hatcheries, much more free flowing water, the fish are gone, and so the environmental impact is much less, if nothing at all, compared to the farms.
Right. Yeah. Nothing like the farms. And, you mentioned a lot of the negative parts of the salmon farming. And then not to mention that in the Pacific Ocean, down BC and lower 48 way, they're raising Atlantic salmon in the Pacific Ocean and get out and start running amok. They can't interbreed with any of our salmon, but they can definitely compete with them for resources.
Hmm. Yeah, it's brutal. It's
Yeah.
brutal. Well, what else is on the radar? Positive or negative? We don't have to just make it a doom and gloom sad thing here.
Positive. Gosh, you gotta switch gears. We're so used to fighting things, right? And playing whack-a-mole. Um, you know, positive is spring seems to be pretty balanced. I mean, we've had a couple weeks of sun. Now we're gonna have some rain, and we have our traditional gale force winds going on. I just I just love spring. In Southeast. So, and I'm actually taking off. Ryan mentioned city grouse, and I'm taking off on Friday to go to Admiralty for the tail end of the season, just to get some off grid time and go after those buggers, because it's been a busy spring and I've only gotten one this year so far.
Yeah, that's super fun when you just kind of hone in and you're spending way too many calories for a small meal, but man, it's so much fun. And sometimes just getting out, like the spring bear is so much fun, even if it's just you're getting on the flats and you're just back to camping again. It's warm enough to camp. It's not horrible. Even if it does rain a little bit, it's just nice to be out and kind of stretch the legs and dust off all the stuff. It's just so great to get out of there. You endured the winter, you made it through, and let's start having fun before it gets too overcrowded with the summer traffic.
Yeah. Yeah, we've got a Forest Service cabin nearby here that just overlooks one of those grassy tidal areas, and that's one of my favorite things. Is about a 5 mile hike from where you can get out of the truck to get up there, but it's just cruising that flat before the grass is real tall, so it's pretty easy compared to the bushwhacking you do looking for deer and stuff. And then once you're there, you just turn the kerosene heater on, let it heat up and sit on the deck out there with the spotting scope and just look for the little black dots running across and grazing their way across. It's one of the best things of the year.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I guess positive things too. It looks like the federal government's poised to deny the Ambler Road potentially. So that's, don't count our chickens before they hatch, but that could be a win there. Be happy about that. And then the kind of closing the loophole, you're saying we endured we three of us all endure every winter up here. Closing that loophole to allow technical non-residents, people that don't qualify for the PFD to come up here and just come up here and take, and then
Hmm.
go back to wherever they're from. I'm in favor of that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that
But
Ambler Road thing was interesting. I kind of it was starting to be talked about when I was up on the Hall Road, and I thought, man, this Hall Road is awesome because if there's a chunk of the state that you can't access, it's to a degree almost like it doesn't exist. So if you are wealthy enough to be able to be flown out to these really remote areas, then well, good for you. But for someone like me, I can't really afford it. And so I thought, man, if they do a really good job on this road, what's going to be the difference between the road to Ambler and the Hall Road, which is such a great road and opens up so much more state to people for people to hunt, for people to drive, for people to go up and over the Adigan Pass and the Brooks Range. But then rather than kind of go up and over the Brooks Range, this goes and runs perpendicular to so many more rivers. And there's so much more, it's just kind of in the way. and the haul road snakes up and over. This one's in front, and I tried to kind of convince myself that, man, if this thing gets built, it would be great for access. Like so many people would be able to hunt it. And then it was, well, it was going to be a private road. And then we'll maybe only open it if it's going to be, but you don't trust people to actually open it up. Because even the haul road was private for a long time until it was open to the public. Um, and I guess, same sort of thing with the second access point in Juneau. If the road was already there, it would be awesome. But now it's like, well, it's not there, and maybe we should be a little bit more careful about this. And as nice as it would be to be able to get up to Fairbanks and just drive out this road and see a different part of the state, I mean, that's an unsustainable thing going forward. If we just keep drilling roads, places, and then keep with these mines, like we're just death by a thousand cuts.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And yeah, I'd say that was my initial thought on the Ambler Road too. It's like, ooh, another access point because I love it up in that area. But then you kind of look closer and it doesn't pan out. None of us here would get to ever use it probably. If it did open up, it'd be after our time.
Hmm.
Yeah, it definitely, it seems like an access point. But do you go down south to float rivers? Do you go and fish those rivers? Do you like seeing people when you're trying to do a wilderness float? Do you like going under bridges when you're on a wilderness float? People come up here and spend time and just there's no wilderness like that left on the planet, right? There's no remote epic hunting or fishing opportunity like that left. And that in and of itself is an economy for the state. Not to mention, if you're a backcountry person like we are, right? You need places like that.
Hmm. So, kind of in closing here, what would be the pitch to get involved with issues? You can also pitch BHA. Why should Alaskans or non-Alaskans care? And then how can they get involved?
Yeah. So Backcountry Hunters is our website. We have chapters all over the country, 49 chapters, and Alaska is on our chapter list. You go to our website. We've got an issues page. We've got an events page. We've got our email list sign up and volunteer list sign up. So whatever your flavor of involvement is, you can stay tuned with us, or you can look at what our issues are and sign petitions or contact your legislators. If you are opposed to the Ambler Road, there is a coalition behind that, and we are directing folks to hunters and anglers for the Brooks Range. BHA is one of over 40 partners in that coalition that are really happy with the seeming intent that they are going to deny that Ambler Road permit. And if you are too, go ahead and sign that petition. It's not too late. The record of decision is not made. So Mendenhall Wetlands, if you care about that, we have a take action on our issues page for that. So you can find all you need on backcountryhunters.org /Alaska.
Yeah. I think I'd be disappointed if I didn't take an opportunity to point out what BHA is and what we're not. We're not just a bunch of contrarians. We're not a bunch of preservationists. We're conservation minded, and we want to protect hunting and fishing for not just Alaska, but the whole of the country. And we want to protect access. So anything that kind of goes against those values of protecting the fish, the game, and the access to them for just the regular, Joe Blow that wants to go out and put 5 miles on their boots and get away from people, we're going to be against that. But we're not. we get kind of sometimes some flack for being some kind of greenie organization, but we're not. We're blue collar, a lot of us hunters and anglers, and we just want to make sure that our kids and our grandkids will have the same opportunities we do. And I got involved because I see a lot of push to take opportunity away, and I couldn't sit back and ignore it anymore. So yeah, I joined in with BHA because I felt like they were doing the right thing.
Well said, both of you. Definitely like it. Appreciate your time. We'll be in touch, and good luck with the sooty grouse and the remainder of the season.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. You too. Thanks for having us.